Now, sharing the screen next are ATNI and Firemind's CEO, Connor McCowan, and Element's Sean O'Toole. Now, Connor is a commercial business leader specializing in IT and telecoms and cybersecurity services with experience across the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America, and USA. Connor is really passionate about driving meaningful change by building real relationships and high-performing teams, aligning technology with human capital. Sean has over 30 years experience building technology and fintech businesses, both as an entrepreneur and with F500 companies. He is active in the startup space as an advisor and investor in emerging technology companies, particularly fintech and e-commerce. Today, they collaborate, and it's going to be an amazing one to present an AI convergence and the evolution of telcos. Connor, I turn the screen over to you. Are you ready for us?
I am indeed. Good morning. I'll try and follow the energy of Kara. I think I need an extra coffee to get there.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Connor.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen and get going. Awesome. So first of all, thank you for allowing me to take some time this morning. Thank you to CANTO, speakers, members, attendees, organizers for an amazing event. And speaking about the digital evolution in a post-pandemic world, which is really exciting. I think we're finally at the exciting start of that, as we seem to be emerging somewhat from the pandemic, although depending on where in the region you are, that's not fully true yet. My name is Connor McCowan. I'm the CEO of Firemind. Firemind is a multi-territory Caribbean-based managed IT and security service provider. We are part of the ATNI group. So we're part of a large telecommunications group, and that includes One Communications in Bermuda, Logic in Cayman, GTT in Guyana, VIA and USVI, and indeed now we're across the US and Canada. But still, the Firemind's mission is very aligned to what is indeed the CANTO mantra for aligning global perspectives back to the Caribbean and the mission of the Caribbean and local businesses. I just took some notes and listening to Kieran this morning. I thought it was awesome. I love the energy. I love the knowledge around kind of crossing the digital divide by using some of the global platforms, but making them very real for our region. And I think the biggest thing I got from that presentation was the importance of energy, human connection. And indeed, again, thanks to CANTO for organizing this. And it just shows the evolution over the last 2 years that we're able to have such interactive engagements, conferences, work meetings, and do it virtually. If I just scroll back for a minute, what I've been asked to speak on today is artificial intelligence convergence and the evolution of telcos. I want to start by saying I'm not a data scientist, I'm not a cloud architect, but in my role as the CEO of Firemind, I've been sitting at the heart of a lot of these process evolution and strategies. And what I'd like the bones of what I'm speaking about today to really communicate and demystify what people think in relating to data science, what people think in relation to artificial intelligence. And what I'm really excited to speak about is kind of the evolving role of the telco in a post-pandemic world in enabling the digital revolution. So when I speak about artificial intelligence, I think everyone jumps straight to the tools. Firemind as a cloud provider with a private data center network and indeed a public cloud access provider, we're very familiar with Synapse, we're very familiar with Snowflake, Power BI, Tableau, all these reporting tools and the technology that will overwhelm most people when they go to view, to establish them and to see what they do for their business. So when we speak about data science, data warehousing, we can scale it back a bit. I think 90% of us don't understand the intricacies of the IT behind those tools, how they're developed and how they're applied. But I think where it's really important to start talking about digital transformation, talking about the application of AI, and indeed talking about the evolution of the telco, is what is the business trying to achieve? And when we look at the telecommunications industry in particular, it's always evolving, it's always changing. And I think when you look at applying AI to something like the telecommunications industry, it's much more difficult than some other industries, because by its very nature, the telecommunications industry connects the past to the present to the future. So your fax lines, your alarm lines, your lift lines, your PRIs, they're very much still your phone number, your home phone number. They're very old technology that still very much connects you and connects certain generations within our region. We then look at where we are today in the rollout of fiber, the rollout of data center networks, and that has been built on top on a hugely complex environment. We then go to where we're going to be in the future, and that's with the evolution of, as Kieran so adequately put, is global providers into our region that are advertising the tools but are not fully there in terms of their application and their access to our region. So in breaking down what artificial intelligence can do for your business, it is simple. You roll it back to strategy. Particularly for anyone familiar with telecommunications, the metrics will always be the same. It will be subscription count, and it will be ARPU, which is the average revenue per unit. I think anyone who's worked in telcos are familiar with those phrases, but these are indeed applicable to every business. So when I say establishing scale, every business, from small to medium business to large multinationals, that is where everyone should start and focus. How can we sell our product, and how can we do so repeatedly? And how can we use new tools to give us that data? So in terms of breaking down what artificial intelligence is and what it does, again, I've mentioned some of the tools that can enable this for you, but you need to establish success by your company's metrics. And what artificial intelligence and data science allows you to do is to wrangle, model, and apply data. So in terms of the first step on the evolution to understanding what your data does, is that you need to understand what are the key metrics that let you know how you grow, how you compete, how you improve financial performance, and how you understand customer behavior. I think understanding customer behavior and have improving customer experience comes down to two things. Do you understand trend analysis? So as I mentioned, the kind of ways of viewing company performance traditionally have been in the past. So let's look at last month's finances. Let's look at last month's sales report. Let's look at last year's. Where really the most evolved companies are now looking at what happened last month, what's happening now, and what's going to happen in the future. How can I predict where my business is going to be in June? That is extremely more so important now in terms of us coming out of a post-pandemic world. As I mentioned, just by our very presence here at CANTO, in terms of being able to interact so effectively by chat tools, by messaging tools, by online forums. These are the things that really make it unique to AI, data warehousing, and what the evolution of cloud services, particularly for our region. And what AI really solves and data science really solves is solving the unsolvable. And what I mean by this is, I go back to my first point. Most people get overwhelmed by artificial intelligence, and they get overwhelmed when they're asked to provide an automated report that accurately does something that a human has always done. So I think when we look what AI can do, particularly what AI can do within the telco industry, is it can do roles and tasks more efficiently than a person or a team of people has done previously. That is very much not to say that it replaces that human or team of people. What it simply does is it enables them with better data. When you look at a sales team, they're going to be much more enabled if they have a data of customers who are interested in their product that they can contact. When you look at a customer success team or a customer care team, when they have a conversation with a customer and they're able to see a trend of if the customer has added products, if the customer has disconnected products, if the customer is being disengaged, it's hugely relevant data. And what I mean by solving the unsolvable is, think of a world, and this is what artificial intelligence does, and this is what the adoption of cloud services do, is where this data is readily available, it's consistent. I think one of the biggest weaknesses we have as humans is we all read things differently, we interpret things differently. I say that as a weakness. It's also why one of the most beautiful things about human is different perspectives. But I think what data can do is take those perspectives and turn them into conversations about the output of it, rather than us having to do the mundane task of putting it together, explaining how we put it together, everyone measuring different metrics. So now when I take it is the AI evolution, the digital evolution, the cloud evolution, let's bring it back to the telcos. As I mentioned, the evolution of telecommunications, I've worked in telecommunications for most of my career. And and it's an awesome place to work. It's an extremely challenging place to work for some of the points I mentioned earlier. Is there's a huge demand on service, and there's a demand on internet bandwidth, there's a demand on TV services, there's a demand on mobile networks working, and there's also something beautiful in that. And for anyone who works in the telecommunications industry, you're intricately connected with both the home user as well as the B2B user, which until about 2 years ago has always been very separate. Now in our regions, that's very different. In the Caribbean region, that's everywhere we operate, they're intertwined in terms of people's expectations of the brand initiative of the telcos. It is linked to home performance and B2B performance. But where we've seen a real convergence and a real adoption of processes is the home has suddenly become the workplace like never before, particularly in our region. What I mean by IoT, the Internet of Things and edge computing, when businesses, small to medium businesses, medium businesses and corporates, enterprise banks, audit firms, large insurance companies have always had a work from home policy. They've always known how to manage people on the edge. And that means people that are sitting on the edge of their network, connecting on a device outside the network back in. Over the last 2 years, that has become real for every business and hugely accelerated. And I think Kieran made some great points this morning on ways you can use digital tools and that you simply have to be online to survive now. And that's something at Fireminds that we've really taken. We've always been unique in that regard. Being in the Caribbean, we were born in the cloud as a Microsoft Gold partner and AWS Select partner. We understand the intricacies of where the data needs to reside, but it's the access into that public cloud from a B2B perspective that we're really focusing on. And I think the key thing about the telecommunications industry indeed is, as I mentioned, connecting the past, the present, and the future of communications and telco services is the home being the workplace is here to stay. I think everyone has seen over the last 2 years that has a part. I think most people, in a recent survey by McKinsey, that most people prefer a hybrid environment where they work from home 70% of the time, and everyone, I think, still wants that human interaction where they have the ability to meet, be it monthly, be it quarterly, in some kind of workspace or office space. But where that's unique for the telecommunications industry is there's a unique opportunity here. Now the traditional centralized network deployment where it goes to the office and the SLA and the standards and the services were all based around that office. It's very, very unique now in terms of suddenly that network and that bandwidth utilization and that service level has extended to the home. So all of the investment we've seen within the AT&I group in our fiber to the home initiatives and fiber to the business initiatives have suddenly become so relevant, and there's huge opportunity in that. I think when you talk about the evolution of the telcos, you need to take into account the evolution of cloud. And this has been difficult for us. As Fireminds, we have invested heavily in private data center infrastructure over the last 10 years. But what we've seen by the acceleration of the pandemic, and we've seen globally the entrance of AWS and Microsoft into building their own telco style networks, and we've seen them enter into our region. And we've been strategic in working closely with them, as I mentioned, a Microsoft Gold partner and an AWS Select partner, is that there is tools and there is processes, and there's a way we can take this convergence in our region to the betterment of local economy. And I think Kieran mentioned some key points, that some of the Amazon tools and some of the Microsoft tools and some of the other YouTube tools, not all are fully relevant for our region. Where Fireminds is putting forward a unique proposition is with those public cloud providers is to make it relevant. And what we mean by that is there's a huge reliance on the public cloud providers globally to be thought leaders, to provide out-of-the-box business applications, to provide out-of-the-box business systems, to provide tools that we can use. And where that is only relevant to our region, again, it brings back to the importance of the network and the convergence of cloud with the network. So where we have focused extensively on in the markets within AT&I is making sure that those cloud services are readily available. They're integrated with a network solution that is both reliable and redundant. And then most importantly, that is accessible from anywhere. As we're seeing in an increasingly globalized world, the access for the Caribbean into a public cloud environment is becoming more and more available. And it's something we're really excited about. The consumer network being the extended office, as I mentioned, is here to stay. And I think the key to that, again, is the journey in there. So when I speak about AI, artificial intelligence, when I speak about cloud adoption, and when I speak about network deployments, bandwidth utilizations, people get overwhelmed. Most business users, strategy owners, government officials that are not in the IT sector, not in the kind of network engineering sector, those terms are thrown around loosely. They're hard to adopt. But what I would say and what I would encourage is we have seen change like never before over the last 2 years. And that change is going to continue to adopt, and we have an opportunity for that change. That change is going to continue to make us adopt the processes we have, make us eradicate some of the convoluted process we have in the past. But there is a huge opportunity for us to connect the Caribbean region into some of these tools and some of these global solutions that are now readily available. The reliance on that is hugely dependent on network. It's hugely dependent on human capital. And I think something in the theme across most of the conversations at the CANTO conference this week is crossing that digital divide within the region. How do we make sure that the next generation is thinking in that way, that we are looking at work from home processes, we are looking for global solutions that are tailored for our region. They're not forced upon our region, or our region is not excluded from them. And that is kind of what FireMinds has made the mission over the next 5 years, is to connect the Caribbean region to public cloud. It's to connect the Caribbean region to networking that they can rely on. And lastly, is to connect the human capital piece. We're doing huge initiatives in Guyana, and we're looking at initiatives in strategic areas across the Caribbean to say, how do we bring that next generation up to make sure that they have that IT human capital in terms of experience, they can garner, in terms of a skill set, and that they can learn. I think just quickly on FireMinds, I think most people are familiar with FireMinds as a cloud provider. I think when speaking about cloud, I'm aware that I'm speaking about Amazon, I'm speaking about Google. I mentioned the data warehousing, Snowflake, Synapse. They're very, very technical solutions that nobody needs to know. I think one key message I'd like to get about the FireMinds mission, and I think as it aligned to the CANTO mission in general, we're born in the Caribbean. We started in Bermuda. We operate all the way north in Bermuda down to Guyana and touch most territories in between. I think where we are dedicated is to closing the digital divide and promoting competitive equality. And we're doing so by making sure that when Microsoft, when AWS, when Fortinet, all our key providers come into this region, that we're front-ending them to make sure that, first of all, those solutions are tailored for our customers in our regions. First of all, they're understood. And then I think most importantly to us is they are deployed, managed, and implemented by businesses that operate within this region and that own that technology and own that skill set. Lastly, what I'd like to say is we can't speak about cloud adoption and we can't speak about network improvements without speaking about cybersecurity. One thing that I'll just touch on quickly, because I know I'm running on time, is that with the evolution of cloud services, with the pandemic forcing us into a work from home environment quicker than ever before, the threat landscape in general has exploded. As I mentioned, with all of these devices, with all of these employees working from home, suddenly there's so many more targets from the negative side of the cybersecurity community. So that's something we're focusing extensively on. And in terms of making sure these cloud solutions, making sure that what we develop, what we innovate, that it's secure. And I think lastly, just to say, is part of our key unique proposition within FireMinds, and indeed an opportunity the Caribbean has in general. It's not unique to FireMinds. We possess our own software development team, our own web development teams, who can help bridge that digital divide. So if anyone does want to reach out to myself, to Tim, who's in attendance today, to Bob, who's our COO, who's speaking later on, please do. And we look forward to speaking with you. And thank you for letting me to run through this conversation topic today. Thank you sincerely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Connor. Now we are passing it over to Sean. Sean, are you there with us?
I am. How are you? Nice to see you all here.
And very good. And nice to see you, Connor, as well.
Hey, John.
And thank you for that. That was super informative. Just so that everyone knows, to give a little bit of background and context in terms of providing these questions to Connor. I'm CEO of a company called Element. We're a SaaS platform providing cutting edge consumer-facing solutions for mobile operators. What that means is we provide consumer-facing mobile apps and web so that mobile operators can basically jump to the front, jump to what's current and modern without all the big heavy CapEx and do it on an OpEx basis. So we operate on what a lot of what Connor talks about. We operate on a cloud platform with a lot of security based around that, and so a lot of things that Fireminds is doing is very relevant for us, and we should absolutely talk afterwards, Connor, so that as we start to build out our clientele in the Caribbean, we want to make sure that we reduce any latency and make sure that it works for the market. So that's great. Maybe could you just elaborate, Connor, a little bit about how ready is the Caribbean for the public cloud and all the tools that come with AI?
I think it's a great question, Sean. And thank we should definitely speak in terms of, I think there's so many synergies in what we're doing, and it's kind of why we love the CANTO conference. It brings all of these skill sets and people together. In terms of, is the Caribbean ready? I think when we work kind of pan-Caribbean, we work across the Caribbean, and it's such a diverse technical landscape in terms of where fiber is deployed, where fiber is not deployed, the offshore bandwidth within those territories back to mainland. So like most questions, I'm sure that what you get asked when I get asked this question says it depends. And it depends on cost, it depends on need. But I would say that the Caribbean is not fully ready yet, but it is definitely it's definitely going to happen within the next 5 years. So as a strategic initiative at Fireminds, what we've done is said, how can we prepare for that readiness? So for simple things like our partnership with Amazon Web Services, our partnership with Microsoft is, let's start as a halfway house. How could we start doing backups essentially into the public cloud? How could we start pointing that data to somewhere that's either lower latency in terms of picking a node within those environments that's lower latency and easier to access for our Caribbean partners and customers? More importantly than that is always hugely relevant in data residency that exists within our region, is sometimes from a compliance perspective, sometimes from a business perspective, and even sometimes just from a fear factor perspective. Data needs to reside in market, or data can reside outside of market. Where that fear factor was very relevant, and the data resident component was very relevant 5-10 years ago. With the evolution of Microsoft 365, the evolution of Salesforce, the evolution of off-the-shelf solutions, data has automatically, it's gone. It's not in our region anymore. It's not in our phones where we think it is anymore. It's not on our servers. It's everywhere. We're seeing that with very public cases of Facebook and others. In terms of the AI component of it, I think I touched on it, and I'd be interested in your own thoughts on, Sean, given your skill set. I believe AI is all about readiness and understanding your direction. I think it's very, very difficult to implement any digital transformation strategy or any AI application correctly without understanding just what are your business objectives. Simply having that roadmap saying, what data do I want to see? And I think that's the bit where people get overwhelmed, is how do I select the tool? Will the tool do everything for me? Is just to simplify it and say, what do I actually want to see? How do I want to measure it? Is that just my own perspective? Does everyone in the business agree with that? Once you have that, there's smart people like yourself, and there's other people that can go and say, okay, now I know what you want. Let me go and let me go and apply that and make sure that that's what we provide you by way of dashboards and all of the things that typical executives want to see.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I would sort of equate AI to like the proverbial hammer that's looking to do damage everywhere, right? It's really a function of like, what problem are you trying to solve? And AI is a great tool, but the application can be in many different places. On our side, we make heavy use of what people would typically see on AI in terms of consumer bots to help consumers better get questions answered more quickly and resolve problems. But we also use it on the backend side for network optimization, doing sort of preventative diagnostics to see where things would break down. But again, it's sort of like one of those things that is like a catch-all, right? Versus like many different tools underneath. So I totally agree with that. When a question is that, like, how does a company really get started? I mean, as a follow-on to that, what's your kind of recommendation in terms of companies here in the Caribbean? Where's the best place to start? How should they think about that starting?
I think I sometimes laugh at how overly simplified this should be. I think if a company starts by asking themselves, what do they do when they're on a meeting or they go into work on a Monday morning that they feel is a total waste of time? Because I think 50% of us have those tasks that we do every week, that are due every month, and we say, oh, why do I have to do this again? And just by human nature, you start to say, take shortcuts, or you start to stop doing it, or you do it sporadically. And I think that is the first question for a company to ask is, when they think of technology, when you look at what particularly your human capital, so the employees you pay for that are running your business, what task are you asking them to do that is not really their skill set? It's not important for them to do. It's mundane. They don't enjoy doing it. How can we do something around that and change that? And I think that's a great first place to start. The second place, I think, is, and I mentioned it in the presentation, is particularly now for businesses, it's very easy to say, let's do something that revolutionizes our business. But it's doing that total cost of ownership on what you're trying to achieve. Because most businesses, a lot of businesses are on their knees at the moment post-pandemic. So I think there's a real way to utilize technologies, off-the-shelf technologies, and having people like yourself, Sean, and what you guys are doing to help inform the journey to get them to lower cost solutions that improve their business processes. But I think in really saying is, how do they start the journey? It's in a post-pandemic world, and it's not post-pandemic. We're still kind of mid-pandemic, epidemic level at the moment. We are still very much in fight or flight mode, and we've been reactive for so long. We've been uncertain for so long. So I think the one thing I would encourage all businesses, and we've done it internally and within our management meetings, is to say simple questions: is this a waste of time? Anything we're doing, any process we're building, any strategy we're looking at, if it's a waste of time, don't do it. So if that was the simple advice I'd give to business leaders and anyone attending today, is if it's a waste of time, don't do it. If there's an easier way to do it, explore it and just align it to exactly what you want the business to do. But I'm really interested to know your feedback on that, Sean, because I might be oversimplifying it there.
No, I actually don't think you're oversimplifying it at all. I think we can get all, very enamored with the technology, and we're just as much of the folks pulling the technology. We can like list out all those like wonderful applications as well, and it can feel overwhelming. But I think a lot of times it boils down to really sort of focusing in on the problem you're trying to solve and what you're there to do to deliver to customers and what the value is. And I really liked the conversation with the CEO panel yesterday, where there was a lot of focus around, I think it was Mike that talked about, shifting the mindset from the sort of, the 5G and the infrastructure side to really focusing on customers. And to me, that's always been my learning, is at the end of the day, this is all about customers and engaging customers and delighting and thrilling customers. And that's what will move those metrics that you talked about as important. Customers paid for all this at the end of the day. So I think it's that anchoring on customers I find is really important, and how to make sure that we're focused on that, and the customer is in the room with us for that, rather than all those other meetings, as you said, that are sometimes not very useful. I guess I'd have one last question for you. Is there something that you're seeing out there that is really being adopted by the rest of the world in the telecommunications space? I mean, you with your parent company have this sort of unique perspective that really mobile operators should really start acting on today.
I think you hit on your previous point, Sean, it's customer experience and boiling down what that is. Because I think with the influx of digital tools, with CRM tools, with measures of success tools, with operational tools being built on top of each other, particularly in the telecommunications industry, where you're sometimes managing 5 networks and they're all converging into one place, and you're trying to mine customer data to give a true experience of that. I think the key point that we're seeing in the global hemisphere is that when you look at the AT&Ts, the Verizons, the Vodafones, they've invested huge dollars into customer experience, and they've invested huge dollars into cloud solutions that enable them to capture that data, dashboard that data, and apply that data. Well, what I would say is where the best providers are doing that is they're not losing their human connection to their customer. And that is even more important in the region we operated in. Is you can have the most automated process in the world, you can have the fanciest dashboards. Again, I'll refer to some transparency in our internal meetings. Is sometimes we'll be looking at 10 different metrics, and some will turn around and say, well, has anyone called the customer to explain this to the customer? And that's still the most important part. So I think what we're seeing is, I think the real unique part of data warehousing, and we work closely with both Snowflake and Synapse, so we see the full capabilities of these systems, we see the use cases, how they're applied, and the amazing data they can provide. But I think that has to be linked with the evolution of customer success. And that's what we've invested heavily in, is evolving customer success teams, that you still have people within your organization that are not tied to these metrics. They're tied to what your customer actually thinks of these metrics, if they agree with it or not, and making sure that the customer is always first, and it's not a cold, hard metric. The metrics are how you run your business internally, how you manage your P&L, how you manage your team. What's still how you manage your business externally, it's got to be all down to if your customers are smiling, if your customers walking down the street and they're happy to recommend you. So I think the best companies are balancing both.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, I think we're out of time. So I want to thank you, Conor. It's a great opportunity to be able to ask you questions and put you on the spot to have to answer them, which is always fun, right?
Awesome, Sean.
But I really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure was all mine.